evening, Doctor and my friends. Today we are taking a trip back in time to look at some really strange and deadly moments in history. The things that people used to blame on curse, magic, and even demons. We are now going to explore how science can help us uncover the truth behind this mysterious event that I'm very sure many much of you guys have heard of, which is this is our topic, uncovering the past deadly legacy, presented by us. These are our members, Li Meishen, Tan Yipei, Li Zixuan, Su An, and me, Fu Tongli. Okay, so, let's take a closer look at our first case, which is the deadly ergot poisoning, which is also known as ergotism. Okay, this is the history of ergotism. Let me take you back to the year 1095 in medieval France. A nobleman named Gaston of Valois was desperate for his son because he has been struck by horrifying illness. And his limbs were swollen, racked with violent burning pain, and no doctor could help him. As you can see in this picture, this is the picture of the family. And with nowhere else to turn, Gaston brought his suffering son to nearby church, knowing for housing relics of Saint Anthony, a 3rd century Christian hermit famous for resisting the devils through prayer and discipline. And then the miracle happened. After touching the relics, Gaston's son became suddenly healed, and then the word spread quickly, where people believed that the healing was divine. It is a blessing from the Saint Anthony himself. And in gratitude, Gaston found that the odor of the Saint Anthony by naming the disease as Saint Anthony's fire, which is a name that captures the searing pain that the victims endure. But it wasn't just Gaston's son. By the 10th century, tens and thousands of people, around 60,000 of people in the southern France had perished from this and so-called holy fire. The victims suffer not only burning limbs but also muscle spasm, convulsion, and terrifying hallucination. And all in well, the culprit was not a curse, and it is actually ergotism. But this fire is not only the time where the mysterious symptoms led to supernatural explanation. Between 14th and 17th centuries, the Europe witnessed outbreak of strange and terrifying phenomenon known as the dancing plague in 1518. So, a group of people, sometimes dozens or even hundreds, suddenly broke into uncontrollable dancing, convulsing in the streets for days on end. Some danced themselves to exhaustion, injury, and even death. And no one could explain why is it so. Is it a curse or is it a mass hysteria? And one theory proposed by researchers in 1990s shows that it is actually a link to ergot poisoning, where the symptoms like convulsion, hallucinations, and irrational behavior are eerily similar to what we now know as convulsive ergotism. And if the connection doesn't stop here, jumping forward to 1692, in the small town of Salem, Massachusetts, a group of young girls began showing strange symptoms: convulsion, visions, fits of screaming, and delusion. The townspeople believed that they were victims of witchcraft, and the famous Salem witch trials began. 20 of people were executed, many more were imprisoned, and the event left a permanent scar on American history. But centuries later, in 1976, a paper published in Science proposed a starting hypothesis. Could the bewitchment have actually been caused by ergot contaminated rye? And the symptoms match. So maybe, it's just maybe that it's not cause of the witches, it's actually some disease that is ongoing and with the lack of scientific knowledge. Okay, after all, you probably noticed the symptoms by now. I know we must be thinking that is it just like a possession? They all experience the signs of convulsion, paranoia, hallucination, like very scary, right? Imagine this. You are living in a small village centuries ago, and one day people around you started to twitching, shaking, and even seeing things that aren't there. Others scream in pain as their fingers and toes turn black and shiver out. It feels like the world has gone mad, or even got cursed. So, ergotism actually manifests in two types, which is convulsive and also gangrenous type. First, there is this convulsive type, which is linked to the dancing plague in 1518, where the villager danced to exhaustion and death. This one will mess with your brain, where the victims will feel pins and needles that twitch uncontrollably and sometimes fall into violent seizures. They will shout nonsense and see strange visions like hallucination, paranoia, and behave as if they are possessed. Hence why the paranoia and hallucination is described. No wonder people in the past thought it was witchcraft or demons. Then there is the gangrenous type, arguably even scarier, where studies link that is linked to St. Anthony fire in 1095, where the victims experienced violent burning pain in the limbs that were described as a fire sensation. And this version of ergotism will block the blood flow to arms, legs, fingers, toes, and victims will feel a fiery pain as if their limbs were burning. And the extremity, which is the hands and feet, will feel somewhat cold, which is cold extremities. And over time, the skin will turn black and flesh will dry out, and in some cases, the limb will just fall off. And so, what was the real culprit behind all those mysterious symptoms, hallucination, and historical tragedies? All of this is just from a simple slice of bread. Back then, no one suspected the grain itself. But now, with science, we know that it is ergot, a tiny fungus with a deadly legacy. The answer is a fungus, Claviceps purpurea, commonly known as ergot fungus. And this fungus primarily infects rye, but it can also affect other grasses too. So here is how it works. When the rye plant flower, airborne spores in Claviceps purpurea will land on the grain and infect the flower. And the fungus then produce yellow sugary slime full of spores. And then the spores will attract the insects that can help to spread the fungus to other flowers. And here's the dangerous part, in which instead of forming a normal grain, the infected flower will develop into a dark, hard scriptorium, which is called as ergot. And this ergot contains toxic compound called ergot alkaloid, where when it is accidentally harvested along the healthy grain, they get ground into flour and baked into bread. And this is how human and animals ends up ingesting the poison, leading to a condition called as ergotism. Well, now, you might think that the ergot poisoning is just a relic of the past, something that is confined to the medieval Europe, witch trials and folklore. But no, ergotism is not just an ancient history. In fact, in the last few decades alone, there have been confirmed outbreaks around the world, which is in the India in 1975, Ethiopia 1977, Australia 1987, United States 1996, and Brazil in 1999. And these modern outbreaks mostly occur in the developing countries where food monitoring system may not be strong enough to detect the contamination in time. So this shows that ergotism is not just historical, but it's a real modern food safety issue that continue to affect our populations. So while most of the prevention work happens on farms or in food production, there are still few things individuals can still do to stay safe, especially in areas where ergot contamination is still a risk. Firstly, buy grains and flour from trusted regulated source, especially if you are in a rural or developing area. Next is avoiding eating moldy or discolored bread or grain products. When you are doubt of it, just throw it out. And next, lastly, if you are growing your own grain, inspect your crops for black, hard, ergot bodies. If they look like little dark claws sticking out of the grain, you should eliminate it. And most importantly, we should know and be aware that alcoholism isn't common today, but it's right in the condition, and it can still happen, especially in places with poor grain storage and food inspection system. So being informed is the first step to be safe. So that's all for algorithm poisoning. I hope you all have learned something new about the mysterious algorithm. Now, moving forward to the next case.
Thank you, Tongli, for the presentation. So now I will invite you to take a step back in time with me, back to a world where a single bite could mean a slow, terrifying death. A world where the word rabies stuck fear into entire communities. For centuries, rabies was one of the most dreaded diseases known to humankind. Before we understood for how it was or how it spread, people believed victims were cursed or possessed. They watched helplessly as once healthy loved ones were overtaken by madness, aggression, and unbearable fear of water. In those days, there was no cure, no vaccine, only fear and death. Imagine being bitten by a dog and knowing your days were numbered. Imagine the heartbreak of a parent watching their child change, suffering seizures, hallucinations, knowing there was nothing they could do. This is the deadly legacy of rabies. Imagine walking home alone at night. The streets are empty, and the full moon hangs low and heavy in the sky. The air is too still, almost unnatural. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a dog howl. Not the playful bark of a pet, but a deep broken sound and filled with something you can't quite explain. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a dog. But you feel that something isn't right. So long ago, people listened to that fear. They believed that the full moon had the power to change the very nature of creatures. Dogs that had once been loyal companions would suddenly growl and foam at the mouth, their bodies red with rage. They would snap at their owners, turn on their families, and in the absence of science, there was only imagination to explain it. And so the stories began. Whispers of men transforming into beasts under the light of the full moon, tales of the werewolf, cursed, hunted, feared. Creatures no longer fully man, and no longer fully animal. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and people locked their doors and prayed that they would not fall victim to the madness that prowled in the darkness. Next is the divine punishment. It wasn't only the moon that people feared. In ancient temples of Greece, healers and priests believed that a dog's sudden madness was no incident. They saw it as a divine punishment. If you were bitten by a mad dog, it was said that you had committed some secret sin, some offense against the gods. The bite was not random, it was a judgment. Rituals were performed, sacrifices made, desperate prayers offered, but none of it mattered. Those who were bitten felt the terror creeping closer day by day. A burning fever, a fear of water so deep that even the sound of it would cause them to gasp in agony. Nothing could save them, not medicine, not prayer, and only death. And then, in the medieval Europe, during deadly outbreaks of this terrible sickness, a new horror emerged, which is the story of the vampire. Victims didn't just die, they changed. They would grow pale and cold, and they would be scared of the water and scared of the sunlight as well. They would gag at the sight of a cross and shudder when they caught their reflection in a mirror. The legends of vampires were born not from fantasy, but from the horrific real symptoms of rabies. Religious whisper of the dead rising, of curses that spread through a single bite. Graves were reopened, bodies staked, rituals performed in order to prevent the curse from walking again. Today we know the truth of rabies. Rabies is not the work of angry gods or the pull of the moon. It is a virus. Microscopic, invisible. So the next time you hear a howl beneath the full moon, or you feel a sudden chill in the night air, remember that it is not because of these myths. So rabies is a deadly disease. It is not a curse, it is not magic, it is caused by a virus. What virus is this? It is called the Lassa virus. It is a very dangerous disease that affects the brain and the central nervous system of both humans and animals. It is caused The rabies virus lives in the saliva of infected animals, especially dogs, but also cats, bats, foxes, and other wild animals. The disease spreads when one of these infected animals bites, scratches, or licks a person, especially if the saliva touches a cut or an open wound. Once the virus gets inside the body, it doesn't attack straight away. Instead, it slowly travels through the nerves, heading through the brain. When the virus reaches the brain, the person begins to feel very sick. This can take around days or even weeks, depending on where the bite happened. The person may start to act strangely, may feel weak, confused, or angry. When a person is infected with rabies, the virus first travels slowly through the nerves towards the brain. At first, the person may feel like they have the flu with signs of fever, headache, and tiredness, or tingling at the spot where they were bitten. As the virus reaches the brain, more serious symptoms begin. The person may feel scared of water and unable to swallow. This is called hydrophobia. They may produce too much saliva, have muscle spasm, or start shaking. Some people become very aggressive, angry, or confused. They may shout, run around, or act like someone else. Others might see or hear things that aren't real, which are called hallucinations. As the disease gets worse, the person may lose the ability to move, which is called paralysis, fall into coma, and eventually die. These signs usually appear days or even weeks after the bite. But once they start, the disease is almost always fatal. That's why it's important to get treatment before these symptoms begin. Diagnosing rabies in people is very difficult because there is no simple test that can confirm it right away, especially before symptoms appear. In many cases, doctors have to look at the patient's symptoms, clinical history, and ask about recent animal bites or contact, and observe the patient's behavior. Once symptoms begin, like confusion, fear of water, or aggression, the disease is usually very advanced. In special laboratories, rabies can be confirmed using tests on saliva, blood, spinal fluid, or even skin samples. But these tests are not always available in rural or small health centers. That's why rabies is often diagnosed based on signs, symptoms, and the person's history of animal exposure. Because rabies is so dangerous, doctors usually don't wait for test results to start treatment. If someone was bitten by a possibly rabid animal, they start giving the rabies vaccine immediately to stop the virus before it reaches the brain. Rabies can be deadly, but the good news is that it's 100% preventable if we act fast. The rabies vaccine is a powerful tool that can protect people from dying of rabies if they are bitten or scratched by an infected animal. After a bite, it's very important to wash the wound with soap and water and go to a clinic immediately. There, the person will get a series of injections called post-exposure prophylaxis. These vaccine shots help the body fight off the virus before it reaches the brain, where it becomes deadly. In some serious cases, a second medicine called rabies immunoglobulin is also given. It's important to get all the required doses. Even missing one can be dangerous. People who are more at risk, such as farmers, animal workers, or people who live near forests, can also get the vaccine before any bite happens. This is called pre-exposure vaccination. And just as important, dogs, cats, and other pets should be vaccinated regularly so they don't spread rabies to humans. The vaccine saves life, but only if we act fast and follow all the steps. Next, we should also stay away from animals that we are unfamiliar. This is because we don't know the past history of the animals. So, in order to not get rabies from these animals, we can prevent ourselves from getting near them. Today, we've learned that rabies is dangerous, but it's also something we can prevent. It starts with knowing the signs, protecting ourselves, and acting fast after a bite or scratch. No one should lose their life to something we know how to stop. So let's remember, avoid risky animals, wash wound immediately, and get to a clinic without delay. Most importantly, let's spread what we have learned to our families, our friends, and our communities. Because the more people know, the more lives we can save. Rabies is real, but with knowledge, courage, and quick action, we can defeat it. Thank you for listening and stay safe. Safe. I'll pass to the next presenter.
Okay, so before we start to talk about the process, let's imagine this. Uh, so now you're walking down a street and you hear a bell ringing. And people start running away. You look and see a person walking toward you, and they are wearing a dark cloak, and their skin is marked with strange patches, and they are carrying the bells. So this is a story of leprosy, a disease that caused fear and misunderstanding for thousands of years. Today, we are going to explore the truth behind leprosy. We will uncover its history, the myth, and how science has changed everything. So let's get started. So this is leprosy, and leprosy has been known for a very long time, and the first signs of it were found in ancient records from India and Egypt over 4,000 years ago. It spread through the world over time, showing up in many countries, and by, by the Middle Age, leprosy was everywhere in Europe, and people thought it was something that could not be controlled, and they didn't understand it. There were hospitals built just for people with leprosy, and many people with the disease were forced to live in these places far away from everyone else. The fear of leprosy was so strong that it spread even faster than the disease itself. People had no idea how it worked, so they believed in all kinds of terrible myths about it. Now let's talk about those myths. Let's start with the first myth, which is punishment from God. So for a long time, people believed that leprosy was a punishment from God, which is a way of saying that someone had done something very wrong. If you had leprosy, you were thought to be cursed. Many people, especially in traditional or rural communities, believe that leprosy is a spiritual punishment sent by a higher power in response to wrongdoing or sin. This belief can lead to deep shame for the person affected and even for their family, causing them to be rejected or avoided by others. Religious or cultural interpretation may label the disease as a curse, making it difficult for individuals to seek for help or treatment. People also believe that leprosy would make your fingers and toes fall off. This made everyone terrified, and people often think of leprosy as a flesh-eating disease where visible deformities are inevitable and irreversible. This frightening image is widely portrayed in stories and media, leading to the belief that disfigurement is the natural and unavoidable result of the disease. Next, for the third myth, they also thought that just touching someone with leprosy could make you sick too. There's a widespread of belief that leprosy can easily spread through simple or casual contact, such as handshaking, sharing food, or sitting beside someone, or touching clothes used by a person with leprosy. This fear can lead to extreme social distancing, isolation of affected individuals, and even expulsion from homes or communities based on the idea that any contact at all is dangerous. These stories were scary, but they also led to terrible treatment of people with the disease. Many people who had leprosy suffer more from how they were treated from the disease itself. The myth about leprosy affected more than just people's health. They changed how people saw right and wrong, purity and punishment. People with leprosy were isolated and they could not live with their families or even stay in their own homes. In some places, people who had leprosy were forced to live on separate islands, far away from everyone else. In some cultures, the word leper was used to describe someone who was shunned or outcast from society. It wasn't just a disease, it was a label that affected how people lived their entire life. So let's uncovering the truth behind the leprosy. The leprosy is caused by a germ or bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae, and it likes cooler area of the body, like the skin and the nerve in the hands and feet. And the bacteria only spread with long-term close contact. The disease is slow symptoms and might not show up for years after a person infected. It usually starts with patches on the skin that looks pale or red, and the person might not feel anything when you touch them. It can also affect the nerve, causing people to lose the feeling in their hands and face. The amazing thing is, is that most people can catch it. In fact, about 95% of people are naturally protected from leprosy. It only affects a small number of people. So, what happens to someone who has leprosy? The first sign is we look at the skin. There's usually a patch of skin that does not feel anything, and it might look like a light or reddish mark. And as the disease goes on, people might lose feeling in their hand and feet due to permanent nerve damage caused by muscle weakness. And without the treatment, the disease can cause disfigurements or problem with the nerve, but don't worry, this is not caused by the disease itself. It's the loss of feeling that causes injury and problem to go unnoticed. Now let's move on to the diagnosis. Diagnosing leprosy is not very difficult, and doctors will usually look for the signs and symptoms like skin patches with no feeling and thickened nerve. Sometimes they take a small sample of skin to check for the bacteria. And early diagnosis is very important because it stops the disease from spreading and helps the person get the treatment they need. The good news is that leprosy is curable. The most important step is catching it early. If someone shows symptoms like light or dark patches on the skin that feel numb or tingling in the hand or feet, getting checked quickly is the key. This treatment is called multi-drug therapy, MDT, and once the treatment starts, people are no longer contagious, and after a while, they start to feel better. The World Health Organization, WHO, even give these medicines for free to anyone who needs them. If treated early, the procedure doesn't cause long-term problems, but without treatment, it can cause serious damage over time. Did you know that leprosy, once feared as a curse or punishment, is not only curable but also preventable? So, for many years, people believed leprosy was highly contagious and untreatable, but today we know that it spreads so slowly and can be stopped in its track with the right approach. We focus on the people to close to the patient, families, members those who live in the same household. These people should be checked regularly for signs of the disease, and in some places, the health worker now give a single preventive antibiotic called rifampicin to protect those at risk. And this medicine is free and reduces the chance of developing leprosy more than 50%. It's a simple but powerful way to protect families. The second point is the public health education. We all know that knowledge is power, Educating communities helps people understand the disease, recognize symptoms early, and remove fear. Many people delay seeking help because they are afraid of being judged. That's why public talks, school sessions, posters, and even local radio programs are essential tools to prevent the disease. When people know the facts, they are more likely to take action and less likely to spread the disease. And the third prevention is practicing good hygiene and living condition. Even though leprosy spread through close and long-term contact, not through the dirt or bad habits, but clean living condition and good nutrition can help to protect your own health. So a strong immune system means your body is better at fighting off infection. So simple steps like eating well, living in a less crowded home, and keeping clean all contribute to disease prevention. And for the conclusion, leprosy is a disease that's been misunderstood for thousands of years. But now we know it's a bacterial infection, not a curse. People with leprosy don't need to be afraid of shame, and they need to be treated just like anyone with a disease. So next time you hear about leprosy, remember it's a curable disease and it's time to leave the myth behind. That's all from my presentation. I will pass to the next person.
First in the harbors, where the ships came in. Then in the villages. Then in the big cities. A strange sickness came from far away in the east. People's skin turned dark, and their bodies piled up in the streets. No one knew what it was. No one knew how it spread. The priest told us, this is the punishment from God for our sins. They said we were being punished for being too proud, too greedy, too full of desire. This terrible sickness, they said, was God's anger made real. So we walked for miles, barefoot, across the land. We hit our backs with whips, we bleed, we cried. We begged God to forgive us. They call us the flagellants. We believed that if we suffered, maybe the world would be safe. But the dying didn't stop. Children still die. Even the priests got sick. Even good, kind people were not safe. Maybe it was not because of sins. Maybe it was not God's anger. But back then, we had no other
Alright,
answers.
students. Let's
Now,
imagine this.
let's find
Your
out what
classmates
the
suddenly
Black
collapse.
Death really
Their
was,
bodies
how
shaking
it
with
began,
no warning,
how it
no
spread,
reason.
and how it
Doesn't that
changed the
sound
world
scary?
forever.
So, long time ago,
A long
people
time
thought
ago,
this was magic
from
or demons. They
1347
believed that
to
seizures were cursed
1351,
from
a
angry
terrible
gods.
sickness
Hence,
called the Black
they would
Death
do crazy
spread
things
across
like making
Europe.
potions from
But it
ground
didn't start
squirrels
there.
or do
It came
scary
from
escape systems
Central Asia,
to
maybe
scare
somewhere
and
near
chase away
today's
the evil
China.
spirits.
The disease
Today,
traveled
we
through
know better.
people and gods,
Let me tell you the real
moving
story
along
of
trade
epilepsy
routes
and why
like the
understanding
Silk
it
Road and by
matters to all
ships.
of us.
This disease was very deadly.
So,
It killed around
4,000 years ago
25
in
to 50
Babylon,
million people.
people wrote
That
about
means
seizures
nearly
on
half
stone
of
tablets.
all the people
The
in
gods
Europe
were
died
symptom
during
right,
this
but
time.
blamed angry spirits.
Back then,
Fast forward to
people
ancient
didn't
Greeks.
understand what
The
caused
doctor named
sickness.
Hippocrates
They
said,
made guesses
"Wait,
based on what they
this isn't
believed.
magic.
One
It's
idea
the
was the bad
it's the
air
brain."
belief.
But
People
nobody
thought that
listened.
smelly air
For
caused the
centuries,
disease,
children were
so
terrified,
they carried
from
sweet-smelling
drinking
herbs
weird
or
potions,
wore
violent
strength big
exorcism,
masks,
or because
hoping it
people
would
feared what
protect
they
them,
didn't
like
understand.
how we use face masks
Finally,
today.
in the 19th century, doctors discovered epilepsy
Second,
is like an
many people
electrical storm
believed the
in the
disease
brain.
was a
No
punishment
demon,
from
no
God.
curse,
They
just neuron
thought they had
misfiring.
done something wrong.
This changed
Some
everything.
groups
But
even
in
walked
some villages
around
today,
hitting
the
themselves with
old fear
whips,
remains.
hoping this
I've
would
heard
make
stories
God
of
forgive
family
them
hiding
and
relatives
stop
with
the
epilepsy,
disease.
teachers refusing to let
Some
kids
people
with
also
seizure attend
wrongly
school,
blame certain
and
groups,
also people
like
wasting
the
money on
Jewish
healers
community,
instead of real
saying
medicine.
they had poisoned the water. This was not
So
true at
despite
all,
significant
but
medical
sadly,
advancement,
it led to
the
violence
system
and hurt many
misconception
innocent
continues to
people.
surround epilepsy. Today,
The Black
I'm going
Death
to clear up
didn't just
3
make people
dangerous
sick,
myths
it
about
changed their
epilepsy that
lives in
many
many big
people
ways.
still believe,
First,
especially in
many
rural
small
areas
villages
where
became
superstition
empty.
still
Imagine
runs.
going to sleep and waking up to
Firstly,
find that
let's
everyone
tackle
in
the
your
biggest
village
fear.
was gone.
Epilepsy is
People
contagious.
were buried in
Some
big
people
groups
avoid
because
touching
there
or
were so
helping
many
someone
deaths.
having a seizure because they think they will catch it.
Also, because
That's
so many people
completely
died,
false.
there were not
Epilepsy is
enough
not
workers.
cold or flu.
The people who
It's
survived
a
could
brain
ask for
condition
better
caused by
pay and
electrical
better
misfire,
treatment.
not germs. You can't get it from
This
touching,
slowly brought the
sharing
old way
food,
of
or even
life,
a blood
where poor
transfusion.
people worked for
So,
rich
next time someone has
landowner
a
and
seizure, don't be
help
afraid to
started
stand
a
up
new
and help.
time called the Renaissance, which
Now,
is a
the
period
most
of
dangerous
learning and
myth
change.
of all. You must force a
Later
spoon
on,
or cloth
people
into their
discovered
mouth
what
to
really
stop
caused
them
the
from
Black
swallowing
Death.
their tongue.
In
Please,
1894,
never
a
do
man
this.
named
It's a
Alexander
Hollywood
Yersin
lie.
went to Hong
The
Kong,
tongue can't be
where
swallowed,
another
but
outbreak happened.
shoving objects
He
in
studied sick
can
people
fatal
and
or
that
blood deadly.
rats under a
Instead,
microscope
just roll
and
it
found a
then
small
gently
germ that caused the disease.
onto their side,
That germ was
pushing
later
their
named
head and
Yersinia
calm the
pestis
seizure.
after him.
Simple, safe, and science-backed.
The Black Death
Finally,
showed
the
up in
oldest
3
myth.
main ways. First,
Epilepsy is
the
caused by
bubonic plague.
evil spirit of
This
curse.
was the most common one.
Centuries ago, people blamed seizures
People
on
got
demons,
high
but
fever,
today we know
felt
better.
very cold,
Epilepsy is
and
a
had
medical
painful,
condition just
swollen
as
spots
for
under their
asthma.
arms or near their
In rural
groin.
areas, this myth still
Sometimes,
cause
their
shame,
skin turned dark,
isolation, or
which
even
is why
poor
it
treatment
was
like
called the Black
measles.
Death.
But modern medicine proved epilepsy comes
Second
from brain,
is a
not the
pneumonic plague.
supernatural.
This attacked the lungs.
So what
People
is
would cough
epilepsy?
a lot, even
Epilepsy
cough
is a
up blood, and have trouble
neurological
breathing.
condition characterized by
It
concurrent
could
or
kill a
erratic
person
seizures
very
caused by
quickly,
abnormal
within a
electrical
few days.
discharges in the brain, much like a freeze-like
Lastly, it's a
discharges. Our
septicemic
research in
plague.
a complex
This
field.
was the deadliest.
These
The germs
episodes
got into the blood,
affect the
people
brain
would feel
function.
stomach pain,
So
throw
globally,
up,
epilepsy
and sometimes
impacts
bleed under the
approximately
skin.
50
This
million
type could
individuals
kill
across
in
all
just
ages
one
and
day.
backgrounds. The encouraging reality is that
The germ
with
that
proper
caused the
diagnosis
Black
and
Death
treatment,
usually
primarily
lives
through
in
anti-seizure
rats.
medication,
Fleas
about
that bite
70%
these
of
rats
patients
can
can
carry the
achieve
germs
seizure
and then
control.
bite
This
humans.
makes early
That is
recognition
how the disease
of
spreads.
symptoms and
In
timely
old
medical
times,
intervention
cities were
crucial
crowded
and
and dirty,
for
which made it easy
effective
for the
management.
disease to pass from one person to another. One kind of the
So, for
plague
clinical
could even
signs,
spread through cough
seizure
and sneezes,
manifests
making
in
it much more
remarkably different forms.
dangerous.
The most recognizable
Back
are
in the
chronic
old days,
seizure,
doctor
which is
could only
formerly
guess
called
someone had a
tremor,
Black Death by
featuring
looking
loss
at their
of
symptoms, like a high
consciousness and
fever and
violent
swollen
muscle
bumps.
contractions. On the other
They didn't
end
have
of the
microscope
spectrum
or
are
lab
some
tests.
seizures
They
caused
didn't really
brief
know
lapses
the
in
exact cause.
awareness, often
Today,
just 5 to 10
doctors
seconds
can
of
take blood
staring that
samples
may
and use
go
machines to
unnoticed.
check for the germs that
For
causes the plague.
focal seizures,
This helps them give the right
present
treatment quickly.
present differently
In the Middle
depending
Age,
on their
people
origin
didn't
and
have
scope,
real medicine for
sometimes
the
causing
plague.
unusual
They tried
sensation like
using
deja vu or
plants,
isolated
cutting the
brain
skin to remove
movement.
bad blood,
About
or
30%
saying
of patients
prayers.
experience sensory
But none
warning
of
for
this really
auras
worked.
from
Today,
strangers,
the disease can be
strange
treated with
smell
strong
to
medicine
rising
called
stomach
antibiotics.
sensation,
If someone gets
signaling
sick
an
early
impending
and takes
seizure.
medicine quickly, they can
So,
survive.
what causes
To stop the
epilepsy?
disease from spreading,
Epilepsy can
people
stem
now
from
try
multiple
to keep
causes.
rats and
These
fleas
include
away
genetic
and watch
factors,
closely in
traumatic brain
places
injury,
where the plague
stroke,
still
or
happens,
brain tumor.
like in
Though
some
in
areas
about half
like
of cases, the
Madagascar
exact
and
cause
in
remains
USA.
unknown.
Today,
Diagnosis
we
typically
know the
begin
Black
with an
Death
electroencephalogram,
primarily
which is
transmitted
also
through
known
the
as
bites
EEG,
of
to record
infected fleas
electrical
carried
brain
by
activity
rodents.
and identify
To
seizure
prevent
patterns. An MRI may
outbreaks,
also be
public
used to
health
check the
strategies focus
structural
on
abnormality in
controlling
the brain.
rodent populations,
Importantly,
especially in rural areas.
observation are available,
Using insect
recording
repellents
details like
and wearing
duration,
protective
movement, and
clothing
awareness
to
level
avoid
during a
flea
seizure to
bites.
provide clinicians
Maintaining
with
good
crucial
sanitation
diagnostic
and
information
avoiding
that
contact with
tests
wild
alone may
animals.
miss.
Early diagnosis and antibiotic treatment, which
So,
can prevent
for modern
severe
epilepsy
illness
treatment,
and spread.
offer
In
multiple
high-risk
effective
areas,
approaches.
public health
For
officials
approximately
also monitor
70%
animals
of
and
patients,
fleas for
anti-seizure
Yersinia pestis to
medication
catch
provide good
outbreak
control of
early.
symptoms. When medication proves
In conclusion, conclusion,
surgical
the
option or
Black Death was not merely an outbreak of
neurodegeneration
a
device like vagus
deadly
nerve
disease.
stimulator can
It was a
significantly impact
transformative
quality of
force
life.
that reshaped
Dietary
cultural,
therapies,
social, and
including
economic
the
structures
medically
across
supervised
Europe.
ketogenic diet,
Today,
show
while
remarkably
we can treat
successful in
and
some
prevent
pediatric
plague,
cases.
its legacy reminds us
Looking to
of
the
the
future,
enduring impact pandemic
cutting-edge
can have
research
on
in gene
society.
therapy,
This was
show
the reality of the
remarkable
Black Death.
success for some pediatric. Alright, students, let's imagine this. Your classmates suddenly collapse, their bodies shaking with no warning, no reason. Doesn't that sound scary? So, long time ago, people thought this was magic or demons. They believed that seizures were cursed from angry gods. Hence, they would do crazy things like making potions from ground-up skulls or do scary exorcism to chase away the evil spirits. Today, we know better. Let me tell you the real story of epilepsy and why understanding it matters to all of us. So, 4,000 years ago in Babylon, people wrote about seizures on clay tablets. They got the symptom right, but blamed angry spirits. Fast forward to ancient Greece. A doctor named Hippocrates said, "Wait, this isn't magic. It's the brain." But nobody listened. For centuries, treatment were terrifying. From drinking weird potion, violent exorcism, all because people feared what they didn't understand. Finally, in the 19th centuries, doctors discovered epilepsy is like an electrical storm in the brain. No demon, no curse, just neuron misfiring. This changed everything, but in some villages today, the old fear remains. I've heard stories of family hiding relatives with epilepsy, teachers refusing to let kids with seizure attend schools, and also people wasting money on healers instead of real medicine. So despite significant medical advancement, persistent misconception continues to surround epilepsy. Today, I'm going to clear up 3 dangerous myths about epilepsy that many people still believe, especially in rural areas where superstitions still run deep. So firstly, let's tackle the biggest fear. Epilepsy is contagious. Some people avoid touching or helping someone having a seizure because they think they will catch it. That's completely false. Epilepsy is not like a cold or flu. It's a brain condition caused by electrical misfire, not germs. You can't get it from touching, sharing food, or even a blood transfusion. So, next time someone has a seizure, don't be afraid to stand up and help. Now, the most dangerous myth of all. You must force a spoon or cloth into their mouth to stop them from swallowing their tongue. Please, never do this. It's a Hollywood lie. The tongue can't be swallowed, but shoving objects in can choke them or break their teeth. Instead, just roll them gently onto their side, cushion their head, and time the seizure. Simple, safe, and science-backed. Finally, the oldest myth. Epilepsy is caused by evil spirit or curse. Centuries ago, people blamed seizures on demons, but today we know better. Epilepsy is a medical condition just like diabetes or asthma. In rural areas, this myth still cause shame, isolation, or even cruel treatments like exorcism. But modern medicine proves epilepsy comes from brain, not the supernatural. So what is epilepsy? Epilepsy is a neurological condition characterized by recurrent, unprovoked seizure caused by abnormal electrical discharges in the brain, much like a brief but disruptive power surge in a complex circuit. This episode temporarily affect the brain function. So globally, epilepsy impacts approximately 50 million individuals across all ages and backgrounds. The encouraging reality is that with proper diagnosis and treatment, primarily through anti-seizure medication, about 70% of patients can achieve good seizure control. This makes early recognition of symptoms and timely medical intervention absolutely crucial and for effective management. So for clinical signs, seizure manifest in remarkably different forms. The most recognizable are tonic-clonic seizure, which is formerly called grand mal, featuring loss of consciousness and violent muscle contractions. On the other end of the spectrum, absent seizures cause brief lapses in awareness, often just 5 to 10 seconds of staring that may go unnoticed. For focal seizures, present present differently depending on their origin in the brain, sometimes causing unusual sensation like deja vu or isolated limb movement. About 30% of patients experience sensory warning called auras, from strange smell to rising stomach sensation, which signaling an impending seizures. So, what causes epilepsy? Epilepsy can stem from multiple causes. These include genetic factors, traumatic brain injury, strokes, or brain tumors, though in about half of cases, the exact cause remains unknown. Diagnosis typically begin with an electroencephalogram, which is also known as EEG, to record electrical brain activity and identify seizure pattern. An MRI may also be used to check the structural abnormality in the brain. Importantly, eyewitness observation are available. Recording details like duration, movement, and awareness level during a seizure can provide clinicians with crucial diagnostic information that tests alone may miss. So, for modern epilepsy treatment, offer multiple effective approaches. For approximately 70% of patients, anti-seizure medication provide good control of symptoms. When medication prove insufficient, surgical option or neurostimulation device like vagus nerve stimulator can significantly improve quality of life. Dietary therapies, particularly the medically supervised ketogenic diet, show remarkably success for some pediatric cases. Looking to the future, cutting-edge research in gene therapy show remarkable success for some pediatric network. Looking to the future, cutting-edge research in gene therapy and artificial intelligence promise even more breakthrough, including the potential to anticipate and prevent seizures before they occur. So now let's talk about how we can protect ourselves from most of the precious asset, which is our brain. One of the most important ways to prevent epilepsy is by avoiding traumatic brain injury. Your brain is a soft tissue like tofu inside your hard skull. Even one bad hit can cause damage that lead to epilepsy years later. So how do we protect it? Always wear a helmet when riding bicycle, motorcycle, or playing rough sports like rugby. Besides, always remember to buckle up your seatbelt when driving or riding in a vehicle. And never drink alcohol or use drugs. They will slow down your reaction and cause accident. And listen, walk away from fights, as one punch can destroy someone's future by harming their brain. Second, let's talk about preventing strokes. Strokes happen when blood stops flowing to part of your brain, and this can trigger epilepsy. Even young people can have stroke if they don't take care of their bodies. Choose to eat fresh food like vegetables, beans, and fruit instead of junk food, which are full of oil and salt. Next, it is important to have a healthy and active lifestyle by exercising, jogging, or playing sports. And avoid alcohol completely. It's not just about behaving well. Alcohol weakens your blood vessel and can lead to bleeding in the brain. A healthy body means a healthy brain. Finally, cleanliness saves the brains. Many cases of epilepsy start with infection from dirty hand, unclean water, or undercooked food. Wash your hand with soap after using the toilet and before eating. These simple habits kill germs that could harm your brains. Always drink boiled, filtered, or treated water to avoid parasite. When cooking pork or other meat, make sure it is fully cooked to kill tapeworms egg. If these eggs get into your body, they can travel to your brains and cause seizures. A few minutes of proper cooking can prevent a lifetime of problems. So, in conclusion, this history of epilepsy reflects humanity's remarkable journey from superstition to science, from ancient skull potion to today's neural implants and AI-driven therapies. While we have made extraordinary progress, the work continues. Each of us have a role to play. By dispelling harmful myths, advocating for research funding, and mastering basic seizure first aid, we contribute to a future where epilepsy no longer limits human potential. Let us transform this legacy of fear into a story of triumph. one where scientific understanding replaces stigma and innovation offer hope where once there was only mystery. So that's all from our group. Thank you.